In the middle of a quiet city, there stood a large mansion with tall iron gates and walls covered in climbing ivy. It looked beautiful from the outside, but inside it felt more like a place frozen in time. Cold, silent, and distant. Every sound echoed as if the house itself didn't want to be disturbed. That was the place where a young woman named Lena worked as a maid. She had joined only a few months earlier, recommended by an agency that helped people find domestic jobs. Lena was polite, hardworking, and always respectful. She wasn't one to talk much. Her eyes always looked a little tired, but there was kindness in her face that made even the other workers like her instantly. Lena came from a small town, far away from the noise of the city. Life there had been simple but full of struggle. Her family had faced hard times after her father lost his job, and when her mother fell sick, Lena had to drop out of school to help with expenses. She moved to the city, hoping to earn enough to support them. The mansion belonged to Mr. Hahn, a name that carried weight in the business world. He owned one of the biggest companies in the country, and everyone spoke of him as a man with no emotions. People said he never smiled, never joked, and never showed any warmth. The staff whispered that his heart was made of ice. The first time Lena saw him, she understood what they meant. He was tall, dressed perfectly in a black suit, his face sharp and unreadable. He didn't waste words. When he passed by, everyone straightened up and lowered their eyes. He treated everyone the same, firm, polite, but distant. Most days Lena barely saw him. He left early in the morning and returned late at night. Her duties were simple: cleaning, dusting, doing laundry, and keeping everything spotless. The mansion had more rooms than anyone needed, and one of those rooms always caught her attention. The music room. It wasn't part of her daily cleaning schedule, but sometimes she had to go there when other maids were busy. Inside stood a grand piano, black, shiny, and elegant. A light layer of dust covered it, which surprised her. In such a perfect house, how could something so beautiful be forgotten? Lena had loved music since she was a child. Her mother used to hum lullabies every night, and her father once saved money for her to take piano lessons at the local church. She had only learned for a few months before life forced her to stop. But those short lessons had planted something deep in her heart. Every time she passed the piano, she wanted to touch it, but she didn't dare. It wasn't her place. The mansion had strict rules. No one was allowed to touch anything personal or valuable. The piano was clearly one of those things. One evening, after a long day of work, Lena stayed late to finish polishing the hallway floor. Everyone else had already gone home. The mansion was quiet except for the soft ticking of a clock and the hum of distant traffic. As she walked past the music room, the moonlight coming through the window made the piano shine. She stopped. Something about that sight pulled her in. She slowly pushed open the door. Dust floated in the air like tiny stars. The smell of old wood and polish filled the room. The piano stood there, lonely but beautiful. She looked around. No one was there. Her heart pounded. She walked closer and ran her fingers gently across the lid, wiping away some of the dust. It felt smooth and cool under her hand. For a moment, she forgot who she was, a maid, a worker, a person with limits, and remembered who she used to be, a girl who dreamed of playing music for people who would listen. Without thinking too much, she lifted the lid and pressed one key. A soft note echoed through the room, clear and pure. She smiled. Her fingers moved again, forming a short melody she still remembered from childhood. The sound filled the empty mansion, soft and emotional. She began to play more, forgetting everything around her. What Lena didn't know was that Mr. Hahn had just returned home. He wasn't supposed to. A late meeting had been canceled, and he had come back earlier than usual. As he entered the hallway, he heard something he hadn't heard in years. A piano playing. He froze. That song, he knew it. His mother used to play it when he was a boy. The notes carried memories he had buried deep inside. Warm evenings, laughter, and the comfort of home. He followed the sound quietly until he reached the music room. There, through the slightly open door, he saw Lena sitting at the piano. Her head was slightly tilted, eyes closed, fingers dancing across the keys. The light from the window fell softly on her face, and for the first time, he saw something alive inside this quiet mansion. He didn't move or speak. He just stood there listening. When the melody ended, Lena sighed, her smile fading as reality returned. She quickly realized what she had done and closed the lid, panic rushing through her chest. She turned and froze when she saw him standing there. Her heart dropped. "Sir, I'm sorry," she stammered. "I shouldn't have touched it. But he didn't scold her. He didn't even look angry." His voice, calm and low, broke the silence. "Where did you learn to play that song?" Lena didn't know what to say. "It's something my teacher taught me when I was little," she said softly. "I didn't mean to disturb you. I'll never do it again." He walked into the room slowly, his eyes fixed on the piano. For a long moment he said nothing. Then, almost to himself, he murmured, "My mother used to play that same piece." Lena's eyes widened. "It's a beautiful song," she said. "It feels peaceful." He nodded slightly. "It does," he said, then looked at her directly. "Finish your work for today. You may go." Lena nodded quickly, gathered her cleaning cloth, and left the room, her hands shaking. All night she couldn't sleep. She kept thinking she might get fired in the morning. Maybe he had only pretended not to be angry. Maybe he was just waiting to tell the agency to replace her. The next day she tried to avoid him completely. But in the afternoon, one of the senior maids came to her and said, "The master wants to see you in the study." Lena's stomach twisted. When she entered, he was sitting behind his large desk, reading something. He didn't look up right away. "Sit," he said simply. She sat on the edge of the chair, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "I'm not angry about last night," he said after a moment. "I just want to ask, why did you stop playing?" Lena hesitated. "Life happened," she said quietly. "My family couldn't afford lessons anymore." He looked at her for a long time, then said, "You have real talent. Don't waste it." Lena blinked, unsure if she heard him right. "Sir?" He didn't repeat himself. Instead, he stood up, walked toward the window, and said, "The piano is to be cleaned regularly from now on. You can take care of it." Then he turned his back, signaling that the conversation was over. Lena stood there for a moment, stunned. "Yes, sir," she finally said, and left the study. That evening, as she dusted the piano carefully, her heart felt lighter. She couldn't explain why, but something inside her had changed. The cold, quiet mansion didn't feel as heavy anymore. Days passed, and whenever she finished her work early, she would sit at the piano for a few minutes. At first, she made sure no one was around. But sometimes she noticed that the door wasn't completely closed, and she had a feeling someone might be listening. She didn't mind. For her, music was not just sound. It was a way to breathe, to feel alive again. And somewhere in that same house, a man who had forgotten what warmth felt like began to remember. Mr. Hahn never said anything about it, but every evening when he came home, he would pause by the hallway, listening quietly before heading to his study. Her music had become part of his daily life, a soft reminder that even in silence, something beautiful could grow again. Lena didn't know it yet, but that single night when she dared to touch the piano had changed everything. It had awakened something that had been asleep for years, not just in her, but in the man who lived behind those walls of ice. The morning after that strange meeting, Lena woke up early as always. She moved quietly through the mansion, sweeping the hallways and wiping the tables before sunrise. The sky outside was still gray, but her thoughts were brighter than usual. The words the master had said yesterday kept repeating in her mind. "You have real talent. Don't waste it." She didn't know what to make of it. He was not the type of man who gave compliments. Everyone said he was cold, distant, and impossible to read. But for some reason, his voice had sounded different that day. Not harsh, not sharp, just calm and thoughtful. As she entered the music room to clean, she noticed something new. The piano lid was open, and a soft cloth and a bottle of polish had been placed neatly beside it. Someone had already taken the cover off the bench, too. It was clear that he meant for her to take care of it. She smiled slightly and sat down for a moment. Her fingers hovered above the keys. She played one soft note, then another. The sound filled the room again, gentle and warm. She didn't play long, just a few short melodies, but it was enough to start her day with peace. Later, as she was dusting the bookshelves near the study, she heard footsteps behind her. She turned quickly and saw Mr. Hahn walking toward his desk. "Good morning, sir," she said softly. He nodded. "Good morning." His tone was flat, but it didn't feel cold this time. He sat down, opened a file, and began reading. After a long silence, he spoke again. "Do you still remember how to read music sheets?" Lena hesitated. "A little, sir. I learned long ago, but I forgot most of it." He closed the file and looked at her. "I'll have some sent here." You can practice after you finish your work." Her eyes widened. "Sir, are you sure?" "I don't want to—" "It's fine," he interrupted gently. "The piano has been silent for too long." She bowed slightly and thanked him before leaving the room. Her heart was racing. It felt strange. This man who barely spoke to anyone, who never smiled, was now giving her permission to play. By the next day, a small stack of music sheets appeared on the piano. Some were old classical pieces, some were simple songs. Lena touched the papers as if they were something precious. Every evening after finishing her work, she would sit and practice for a short while. At first, she made many mistakes. Her fingers were stiff and her reading was slow. But slowly, day by day, the melodies began to flow more naturally. The more she played, the more confident she became. Unknowingly, her music started to reach other parts of the house. The guards by the front gate, the cook in the kitchen, even the gardeners outside. Everyone could hear faint tunes drifting through the hallways. They began to talk about it quietly. "The new maid plays so beautifully," one of them whispered. "She plays the master's piano?" Another asked in surprise. "Yes, and he doesn't stop her." No one understood how such a thing was possible. But something was changing, not just in Lena but in the house itself. Mr. Hahn began coming home earlier than usual. Instead of heading straight to his study, he would stop by the music room for a few minutes. Sometimes he stood by the door. Other times he sat in a chair across the room, pretending to read while listening. Lena always noticed his presence but never said a word. One evening, as she finished playing, he asked quietly, "Do you know who composed that song?" She looked at the sheet. "It says Chopin, sir." He nodded. "My mother loved that one." The air between them fell silent for a moment. Lena wanted to say something comforting, but she didn't know what was appropriate. Finally, she just said, "It's a peaceful song. It sounds like something full of memories." He didn't reply, but the way his eyes softened told her she was right. Over the next few weeks, their interactions became less formal. He started greeting her when he saw her in the hallway, sometimes asking about her family or how long she had been working in the city. His voice was still calm and measured, but it no longer carried that cold edge. Lena, too, began to see him differently. Beneath the quiet and the serious expression, she sensed a deep sadness. A man who carried too much pain, but didn't know how to let it go. She remembered the first time she had seen him standing alone in the hallway listening to her play. There had been something almost fragile in that moment, hidden behind his strong face. One rainy afternoon, the electricity went out. The storm outside was heavy, and most of the staff had gone home early. Only Lena remained, lighting candles in the living room to keep the house from falling into darkness. She walked into the music room and saw Mr. Hahn standing near the window, looking out at the rain. The sound of thunder rolled softly in the distance. "You can go home if you want," he said without turning around. "It's not safe to stay so late," she shook her head. "It's all right, sir. My bus won't come until the rain slows down." He turned slightly toward her. "Then play something while we wait," he said. Lena was surprised. "Now in this weather?" He nodded once. "Music sounds different in the rain." She smiled faintly and sat at the piano. The flickering candlelight made the room look warm, almost alive. She started to play a gentle tune, something she had made up herself years ago, a melody that reminded her of home. The rain fell harder, tapping against the windows, but the sound of the piano rose above it. Mr. Hahn stood quietly, watching her hands move across the keys. There was something peaceful in that scene, the warmth of the candlelight, the storm outside, and the calm between them. When she finished, he spoke softly. "That wasn't from the sheets." She looked down, embarrassed. "I'm sorry. I just played something I remembered from when I was little." He shook his head. "Don't apologize, it was beautiful." For a man like him, those words were rare. Lena didn't reply, but her heart swelled with quiet pride. After that day, the piano became part of their routine. Every evening, she would play while he worked in the corner of the room, sometimes typing on his laptop, sometimes just listening. Neither of them said much, but they didn't need to. The music spoke for them. The other maids began to notice changes in the master, too. He seemed more patient, more thoughtful. Once, when the gardener accidentally broke a vase, he didn't yell. He simply said, "It's fine. Replace it tomorrow." That was something none of them had ever seen before. Whispers spread quickly. Some said the maid had softened his heart. Others joked that maybe music had worked magic on him. Lena tried to ignore the gossip, but deep down, she felt that something truly was changing, not because of her, but because music had found its way back into the house. One afternoon, as she was finishing her cleaning, Mr. Hahn called her to the study again. She entered carefully, as always. He handed her a small envelope. "What's this?" she asked. "An application form," he said. "There's a music competition next month in the city. You should enter." She froze. "Sir, I can't. I'm not a real pianist. I just play for myself." He looked at her calmly. "You are more than you think." Lena didn't know what to say. "But I don't even have the right clothes or time to—" "I'll arrange it," he said simply. "You only need to decide if you're willing." She looked down at the envelope in her hands. "Why are you helping me?" she asked quietly. He hesitated before answering. "Because once someone believed in me when I didn't believe in myself, and I never got the chance to thank her." She understood immediately that he was speaking about his mother. The room fell silent again, filled only with the ticking of the clock. That night, Lena stayed awake thinking about the competition. She wasn't sure if she was brave enough, but something inside her wanted to try. Maybe this was her chance, not just to prove herself, but to honor the man who had given her this unexpected kindness. When she sat at the piano the next morning, the first rays of sunlight touched the keys. She began to play softly, and in that moment, she realized that music had become more than just sound. It was connection, trust, and hope. Neither of them said it out loud, but they both knew their lives were beginning to change. Note by note, one song at a time. Days turned into weeks, and the sound of the piano had become part of the mansion's daily rhythm. Whenever Lena played, the house no longer felt empty. The echoes that once made it cold now carried warmth and life. Mr. Hahn's attitude continued to surprise everyone. He was still quiet and reserved, but he no longer looked as distant. He started greeting the staff politely, sometimes even asking if they had eaten or needed help with supplies. For the first time, people said they saw him smile, even if just faintly. But for Lena, the biggest change was how comfortable she now felt around him. She had stopped feeling nervous whenever he entered the music room. Instead, she felt calm, almost safe. Every evening when the mansion grew quiet and the rest of the staff finished their work, she would sit at the piano, and he would take his usual seat across the room. Sometimes he brought files, pretending to read while she played. Sometimes he just closed his eyes and listened. They rarely spoke during those sessions, but there was a kind of peace between them. It was as if the music created a space where words weren't needed. One evening, as she finished playing, he said quietly, "Do you know why I kept the piano all these years?" Lena shook her head. "It belonged to my mother," he said. His voice was steady but softer than usual. "She was a pianist. She used to play for me every night before I went to sleep." Lena's fingers rested gently on the keys. She didn't interrupt him. "When she passed away," he continued, "I couldn't bear to hear the sound of it, so I had it moved here. I told myself I didn't care, but every time I walked by that room, I felt something missing." He paused for a moment before adding, "Then one evening, I came home and heard someone playing that same tune she used to love." Lena's chest tightened. She didn't know what to say. The silence between them felt heavy but meaningful. Finally, she said softly, "I didn't know, sir. I'm sorry if it brought up old memories." He looked at her and gave a small, tired smile. "Don't be. It was the first time in years that I remembered her with peace instead of pain." Lena smiled faintly, her eyes glistening. "She must have been a wonderful person." "She was," he said simply. From that day, their conversations grew a little more open. He would ask about her family, her hometown, and her childhood. She told him about her small house near the fields, about her parents, and how she used to help her mother make bread early in the morning. He listened quietly, sometimes even asking small questions, showing a side of himself that no one else at the mansion had ever seen. But not everyone was happy about this quiet friendship. Among the staff, whispers began to spread again. Some said Lena was trying to get close to the boss for special treatment. Others said she was pretending to be kind to gain his trust. The gossip grew louder with every passing day. Lena tried her best to ignore it. She focused on her work and her music, pretending she didn't hear the snide comments behind her back. But sometimes, late at night, when she was alone in her small room, the words stung more than she wanted to admit. She never wanted attention. She only wanted to play. One morning, as she was polishing the piano, another maid walked in with a tight smile. "You must be very lucky," she said in a low voice. "The master lets you play his piano, even though the rest of us can't even breathe near it." Lena paused and said calmly, "He only lets me because he said the piano needed care." "That's all." The other maid crossed her arms. "Sure, that's what everyone thinks." Then she turned and left, leaving Lena staring at the floor. That day she played without heart. The notes sounded weak, and her mind kept drifting to the things people were saying. Mr. Hahn noticed it immediately. When she stopped playing halfway through a song, he asked quietly, "Something's wrong?" She shook her head. "No, sir. I'm fine." He didn't press further, but later that evening, when he walked past the staff quarters, he overheard two maids whispering. He didn't say anything, but his expression hardened. The next morning, he called all the staff to the living room. Everyone stood nervously in a line. Lena stood at the end, unsure of what was happening. Mr. Hahn spoke in his usual calm but firm voice. "I've heard some things being said about people in this house. I don't want rumors or disrespect here. Everyone will treat each other with professionalism. Is that clear?" The room fell silent. Every head nodded. He didn't look at Lena directly, but she knew the words were meant to protect her. Later that evening, when she thanked him, he simply said, "You don't owe me thanks. Just keep doing what you love." It was the first time she felt truly seen, not as a maid, but as a person. Over the next few days, she practiced harder than ever. She wanted to prove she was worthy of his trust. Her playing grew smoother, more emotional. She started to play small pieces of her own creation, and sometimes he would stop working just to listen. One evening, after a long day at the company, he walked into the music room looking more tired than usual. He didn't speak, he just sat down and leaned back in his chair. Lena noticed how weary he looked and asked gently, "Rough day, sir?" He gave a faint smile. "You could say that. Some people never stop fighting for power, no matter how much they already have." She didn't know much about his business, but she could tell the pressure on him was immense. "Would you like me to play something peaceful?" she asked. He nodded. She began playing a soft tune, one she had learned years ago but never forgotten. The melody was light, like a quiet conversation between wind and rain. As she played, his eyes slowly closed, his shoulders relaxing. When she finished, he opened his eyes again and said quietly, "Thank you." Something about that moment felt different, closer, deeper. After that evening, their connection seemed to grow stronger, though neither of them ever spoke about it. They simply understood each other in silence. One afternoon, while dusting near the piano, Lena found an envelope resting on top of the instrument. Her name was written neatly on it. Inside was a small card with a note in his handwriting. "For the upcoming charity event at the mansion, I would like you to perform one piece. Consider it a way to share your music with others." Lena's heart skipped a beat. She couldn't believe it. The annual charity event was attended by many important guests, businessmen, politicians, and famous families. When she went to see him about it, she was still holding the letter with trembling hands. "Sir, I can't play in front of all those people," she said. "I'm not a performer." He looked at her calmly. "You've been performing for months right here. You just didn't notice it." "But that's different," she insisted. "They're rich, educated people. I'm just a maid." He stood up, walked toward her, and said in a steady voice, "When you play, no one sees a maid. They see music. That's what matters." Lena didn't know how to respond. Her throat tightened, and she could only whisper, "I'm scared." He gave a small nod. "Good, fear means you care, but don't let it stop you." She took a deep breath. "If you really believe I can do it, then I'll try." That evening she stayed up late practicing. Her fingers ached, but she didn't stop. She wanted to make him proud, not because of his power or status, but because he had believed in her when no one else did. As days passed, preparations for the event filled the mansion. Workers decorated the halls with flowers and golden ribbons. The grand piano was polished until it gleamed. The other staff watched silently as Lena practiced each day. No one dared to say anything anymore. Even those who had once whispered behind her back seemed to realize she had earned this chance. On the night before the event, she couldn't sleep. She lay awake staring at the ceiling, replaying every mistake, every wrong note she might make. Then she remembered his words. When you play, no one sees a maid. They see music. Those words gave her strength. When morning came, the mansion was alive with movement. Guests began arriving in elegant clothes. Cars lined the driveway, and the scent of fresh flowers filled the air. Lena stood backstage in a simple white dress the housekeeper had helped her borrow. Her hands were shaking, but deep inside, she felt ready. From his seat among the guests, Mr. Hahn looked calm, but his eyes kept glancing toward the stage. As the lights dimmed and the crowd settled, Lena took a deep breath and stepped forward. She sat at the piano, her heart pounding, her fingers trembling over the keys. Then she began to play, the same soft melody that had once filled the empty mansion. The room fell completely silent. Every note carried her story, her struggle, her dreams, her quiet courage. The audience listened, mesmerized as the once-forgotten maid brought the grand hall to life. And somewhere in that crowd, the cold CEO who had built walls around his heart finally felt them begin to melt. The moment Lena's fingers touched the keys, the room changed. The noise from the crowd, the clinking of glasses, the quiet conversations all faded away. The first note rose softly into the air, clear and full of feeling. It was as if time itself had paused to listen. Her nerves melted as the music took over. She played with her whole heart, forgetting about who was watching. Every note carried her emotions, her memories, her hope, and her gratitude. The grand hall, filled with powerful people and shining lights, suddenly felt small, warm, and human. From his seat in the front row, Mr. Hahn sat completely still. His eyes stayed on her, calm yet proud. He could see how nervous she had been when she walked in, but now there was no fear in her face, only peace. The melody filled the hall like sunlight after rain. When the final note faded into silence, there was a brief moment where no one moved. Then came the applause, soft at first, then stronger, louder, until it filled every corner of the mansion. Lena froze for a moment, hardly believing what she heard. People were standing, clapping for her. Her hands trembled on her lap. She bowed shyly and looked up just in time to see Mr. Hahn standing too, clapping with a small smile that reached his eyes. It was the first time she had seen him look so open, so human. After the performance, guests approached her with warm smiles. Some asked where she had trained. Others said her playing reminded them of professional pianists. Lena could only smile and say thank you. She didn't know what else to say. Later, when the guests began to leave and the lights dimmed, Lena went back to the piano. The hall was empty now, and the silence felt heavier than before. She ran her fingers lightly over the keys, still not believing what had happened. "You played beautifully," said a quiet voice from behind. She turned and saw Mr. Hahn standing near the doorway, his hands in his pockets. "Thank you, sir," she said softly. "I was so nervous. I thought I'd make a mistake." He walked closer, shaking his head slightly. "Even if you had, it wouldn't have mattered. You played with heart. That's something no mistake can hide." Lena smiled shyly. "I didn't know people would like it that much." "They didn't just like it," he said. "They felt it." "That's rare." There was a pause. Neither spoke for a few seconds. Then he said, "I want you to continue learning. Not just here, but properly. I'll arrange lessons for you with a teacher in the city." Lena looked at him in disbelief. "Sir, I can't accept that. You've already done too much for me." He shook his head. "You're wasting your gift if you stop now. You reminded me what it feels like to listen, to care. The least I can do is help you move forward." Her eyes filled with tears she tried hard to hide. "I don't know how to thank you," she whispered. "You already did," he said quietly. "Tonight." He turned and left the hall, leaving her standing by the piano, her heart full. The following weeks were full of change. True to his word, Mr. Hahn arranged a private piano teacher for her. Every Sunday, a kind older woman came to the mansion to guide Lena. At first, she felt out of place, sitting in front of a teacher again after so many years. But her love for music made her push through the nervousness. Mr. Hahn sometimes passed by the room during her lessons. He never interrupted, but his small nods of approval made her practice harder. As she improved, the atmosphere in the mansion changed even more. The staff grew used to the sound of music filling the halls. It was no longer strange. It felt natural, like the house had found its missing heartbeat. Even Mr. Hahn seemed different. The workers noticed that he no longer carried the same heavy air he once had. He talked more gently. Sometimes he even joined them for tea in the afternoon, though he didn't say much. The mansion, once known for being silent and strict, now felt alive. But behind this calm, Lena sensed that something was troubling him. One evening, she found him sitting alone in the music room, staring at the piano without saying a word. The lights were off except for one lamp, casting long shadows across the floor. She hesitated at the door before stepping in. "Sir," she said softly. He looked up slowly. "You're still awake." "I couldn't sleep," she said. "I thought I heard something." He gave a faint smile. "You heard silence. It's louder than people think." She walked closer, unsure whether to ask what was wrong. After a long pause, he said, "The company isn't doing well. There are people who want to take it from me. It's nothing new, but lately, it's getting harder to fight." Lena didn't know much about business, but she could see the exhaustion on his face. "You've worked so hard, sir. Maybe you just need to rest." He shook his head. "Rest doesn't change what's coming." She sat down at the piano bench quietly and began to play a soft tune. It was slow and comforting, the kind of melody that carried warmth. The notes filled the room gently, wrapping around him like a blanket. For a long while, neither of them spoke. The only sound was the music and the faint hum of the rain outside. When she finished, he said softly, "It's strange. Whenever you play, the world feels less heavy." She looked at him and smiled. "Music doesn't fix problems, sir, but it helps us remember that life is still beautiful even when it's hard." He nodded. Maybe that's what I needed to hear. The next few days were busy. Mr. Hahn's company meetings grew longer and he often came home late. But even on those nights, he made time to stop by the music room. He never said much, but the simple act of listening seemed to give him peace. Then came the night of the company's annual gala, a huge event held at a hotel downtown. Lena didn't go, of course, but she stayed up waiting for him to return. When he finally came home past midnight, he looked exhausted. "How was it?" she asked quietly as she handed him a cup of tea. He smiled faintly. "Complicated, as always. But your music was in my head the entire time." "It helped," she laughed softly. "I'm glad to hear that, sir." As days turned into months, their bond deepened, not in ways people would gossip about, but in quiet, genuine respect. He had become more than just her employer. He was someone she admired deeply. And for him, she had become more than just a maid. She was a reminder of everything he had lost and everything he had regained. One afternoon, her piano teacher announced that Lena was ready to perform in a small recital downtown. It wasn't a grand concert, just a simple event for students to showcase their progress. When she told Mr. Hahn, he insisted on attending. The night of the recital, Lena stood backstage again, her heart racing just like before. The hall was smaller than the mansion's grand room, but to her, it felt just as big. As she looked out into the audience, she spotted him sitting quietly in the front row. Their eyes met briefly, and she felt a wave of calm wash over her. When her turn came, she walked to the piano and took a deep breath. She began to play, a song she had written herself, one that told her story through melody. It started softly, uncertainly, then grew stronger and more confident, ending with a bright, hopeful chord. The audience applauded warmly. When she stood and bowed, she saw him smiling, a real smile, gentle and proud. After the event, as they walked out together, he said, "You've come a long way from the night I first heard you play in the dark." She laughed quietly. "You scared me that day." "You scared me too," he said, half joking, half serious. "You reminded me of feelings I thought I'd buried forever." They walked in silence for a while, the cool night air brushing past them. "Do you ever miss your mother?" Lena asked softly. "Every day," he replied. "But now when I hear the piano, I don't just feel sadness. I feel gratitude." Lena smiled, her eyes warm. Then maybe that's what she wanted, for you to remember her with peace. He nodded, looking up at the stars. "Maybe you're right." That night, as the car drove them back to the mansion, the city lights reflected softly through the windows. Neither of them spoke, but both knew their lives were no longer the same. The girl who had once been afraid to touch the piano had found her courage, and the man who had once lived behind walls of silence had found his heart again. The days after Lena's recital felt different, lighter. The mansion was the same, yet something had changed. The air carried a calm energy, and the people who worked there smiled more often. Even the house itself seemed alive again. Lena continued her piano lessons every weekend. Sometimes she practiced late at night when everyone was asleep. The quiet hours after midnight were her favorite. The world outside would be still, and her music would echo softly through the hallways like a gentle breeze. Mr. Hahn often passed by the door during those hours, pausing to listen. He never interrupted her anymore. He just stood there for a while before quietly walking away. There was something about the sound of the piano that made him feel at peace, even after the longest, hardest days. One evening, he invited Lena to join him for tea in the garden. It was unusual. He never invited the staff for such things, but she agreed politely. They sat under the soft glow of garden lamps. The air smelled of jasmine and fresh earth after a light rain. Neither spoke for a while. He simply watched the small pond while Lena sat nervously, unsure what to say. "You're quiet tonight," he said after a while, stirring his tea. "I didn't want to speak unless you wanted to talk," she said honestly. He smiled faintly. "You're always careful. But I asked you here for a reason." She looked up, surprised. "Is everything okay, sir?" He nodded slowly. "Better than before. Much better, actually. I wanted to thank you." "Me?" "Yes," he said softly. "Since you came, things have changed around here. I didn't realize how much I'd forgotten about living. About feeling. You reminded me of that." Her eyes widened a little. "I didn't do anything special." He shook his head. "You did everything special. Your music, your honesty, even the way you care for the smallest things. It all brought life back to this place." For a moment, Lena didn't know how to respond. Her chest felt heavy, but in a good way. "I'm happy if I could do even a little good," she said softly. He nodded again, then looked toward the sky. "Do you ever think about what comes next for you?" The question caught her off guard. "What do you mean?" "I mean your future," he said. "You have talent, Lena, real talent. You shouldn't spend your life just cleaning rooms and serving tea. You deserve to stand where people can hear you, where your music can reach hearts, not just walls." She looked down at her hands. "I've thought about it," she admitted. "But I don't know if I have the courage. The world outside is big. And you're not just anything," he said firmly. "You've already proved that. The only difference between you and others is belief." His words lingered in her heart long after the conversation ended. That night, when she went back to her room, she couldn't sleep. His words kept echoing in her mind. She sat at her small desk, looking at the piece of paper where she had scribbled melodies for weeks. Her teacher had told her she had a gift for composing, but she never believed it until now. Maybe it was time to believe. The next morning, she decided to write a song, something that told her story. It wasn't about sadness or pain, but about finding light in unexpected places. Every morning before work and every night before bed, she wrote little by little, shaping the melody like a secret she carried close to her heart. When she finally played it for her teacher, the woman was speechless. "This isn't just a song," she said softly. "It's a journey." Encouraged, Lena recorded it with a simple camera and uploaded it online, not expecting anything. Days passed, then weeks. She almost forgot about it. Until one evening when Mr. Hahn walked into the music room holding his phone. "Did you post this?" he asked, showing her the screen. Her heart skipped a beat. It was her video. She nodded shyly. I didn't think anyone would watch." He smiled gently. "500,000 people already have." She froze. "What?" "It's spreading fast," he said, still scrolling through the comments. "People are saying your song gave them hope. They want to know who you are?" Lena didn't know what to say. Her hands trembled and her heart raced. "That's
"Unbelievable," she whispered. "It's well-deserved," he said.
Your music reached people just like I knew it would." From that day, things changed quickly. Music schools started reaching out to her. Small companies offered to help her record more songs. For the first time in her life, people saw her not as a maid, but as a musician. Mr. Hahn supported her quietly through it all. He didn't take credit or make big gestures. He simply guided her when she felt overwhelmed. Sometimes when she doubted herself, he reminded her of the night she played at the mansion for the first time. "Remember how everyone listened?" he would say. "They listened because your music was real. Keep that truth with you." Months passed and Lena began performing at small events. Each time she felt her confidence grow. The applause, the smiles, the tears of strangers, all of it reminded her of why she loved music in the first place. But even as her world expanded, she never forgot where it started. Every week, she returned to the mansion to play in the same room where everything began. One evening, after one of her performances, she found Mr. Hahn sitting quietly in the same chair where he had first listened to her. His hair was slightly grayer, his expression softer. "You've made this place alive again," he said as she sat down beside him. She smiled. "You gave me the chance to." He looked at her thoughtfully. "Do you ever regret leaving this job?" She shook her head. "How could I regret something that gave me wings?" He laughed quietly, then sighed. "It's strange. I thought I was helping you, but it turns out you helped me more. You reminded me that people can still surprise you, that life can still change even after everything seems lost." She smiled, her eyes warm. "Maybe that's what music does. It changes people without asking for permission." He nodded. "Yes, it does." Silence filled the room again, but it wasn't the heavy silence of the past. It was peaceful, almost sacred. After a moment, he asked, "What will your next song be about?" She thought for a moment, then smiled. "About gratitude. About the people who believed in me when I didn't believe in myself." He looked at her with quiet pride. "Then I'll be waiting to hear it." That night, as she played for him, the melody carried everything they had shared. The struggles, the kindness, the growth. It wasn't a farewell song, but a celebration of everything they had become through each other's presence. Weeks later, her new song was released. It spread even faster than the first one. People everywhere wrote about how it made them cry, how it made them remember the people who helped them when they were down. Lena never mentioned names, but in every interview she said the same thing. "My music is for the person who believed in me when I was invisible. Without him, I'd still be playing in silence." And somewhere in his office, Mr. Hahn would smile quietly as he watched her perform on the screen, his eyes soft with pride and affection. He never needed the world to know who he was in her story. It was enough that she remembered. Months turned into a year. Lena became known as a pianist with a heart. Her songs played in cafes, schools, and even hospitals. People said her music healed sadness. One afternoon, she returned to the mansion for the anniversary of her first performance there. The house looked brighter than ever, filled with flowers and laughter. The workers had planned a small gathering for her, celebrating her success. When she walked in, Mr. Hahn was waiting by the piano. "You've come a long way," he said softly. She smiled. "I followed the sound you helped me find." He nodded, and for a moment both of them stood quietly, looking at the piano that had changed both their lives. Then, without another word, she sat down and began to play the same piece she had performed that very first night, the song that had turned silence into connection. As the music filled the room, memories floated through their minds, the dark hallway, the nervous girl, the cold man who didn't know how to smile. Now they were gone, replaced by warmth, by understanding, by light. When the final note faded, he said softly, "You were always meant for this." She smiled, "And you were meant to hear it." The story of a maid and a cold CEO had started with a piano and ended with something much greater. Two broken souls finding healing through music, kindness, and the courage to believe again. It wasn't just a story about success. It was about how one act of kindness, one moment of faith, could change the course of two lives forever. And as the evening sun poured through the windows, lighting up the piano keys, it felt like a promise that no matter where life led them next, the music would always bring them back home.